Welcome to the Virtual Excellence Show, where we talk to amazing people about excellence in all things virtual. And today we'll be speaking to Stephen Downes, who's an expert in all things educational and virtual education. And amongst other things, Stephen has one of the initiators of the very first MOOC, massively online, open online course. So one of the top experts to be able to gain insights from that. So first, it's introducing what we're doing. This is the Virtual Excellence Show. We have weekly episodes, weekly interviews, lots of other tutorials and segments. We all go to see our resources at our website, the vx.show. We also have a conversation on our Facebook group. I use the hashtag Twitter, #VXShow. And if you want to come back and find more, we have our episodes up weekly. So firstly, just to come to the highlight of the show, Stephen Downes. So he has been in this space for decades, created many innovations in the space, has been really taking many things, and I think a bit of a provocateur in this space in bringing new ideas to bear. So I'd like to welcome the very interesting Stephen Downes. Good to have you on the show, Stephen.
Oh, it's nice to be here, Russ. Thanks for inviting me.
So this is 2020, where we've had some changes to the world, including things that have made us more distant and more virtual. And just love to hear your reflections on how that's been impacting the educational space over the last months.
So it's had a significant impact, obviously. There was a lot of panic. Maybe that's too extreme, but a lot of frantic work at first. It hit here in mid-March, pretty much the same time as the United States, actually. My last day in the office was March the 12th, and I was going to go in March the 13th, but we had a couple of cases reported, and that was the end of that, and I haven't been back since. So in our school year, there was 1 or 2 months left, depending on the level. And so there was a mad scramble to go online immediately. So we had the invention of the term remote learning, which came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, everybody was putting their classes on Zoom. And people were proclaiming, this is not online learning. This isn't the real thing, really, But they got through it, and they got through it pretty well here in Canada. And people graduated from high school. There are little signs all over, the countryside here. I'm a graduate of such and such a high school. And they've had all summer to prepare. Different provinces are doing things differently. For the most part, here in Canada, we have, as they say, flattened the curve. So we're not facing the terrible scenario that they're looking at in the United States. Many schools are now looking at going back to in-person classes, same with the universities, but everybody's on edge. We're still wearing masks, we're still social distancing. And so people have gotten themselves up to speed with real online learning, including still remote teaching. But, because everybody's afraid of, and quite rightly so, of a second wave or of something coming across the border. And so people want to be prepared.
So this comes a little bit to the point that, as you're saying, suddenly everyone thinks remote learning. Okay, we're stuck at home, we have to learn. And there's a lot of schools, for example, that have just said, okay, we've got our Microsoft Teams or Google whatever's, and we have a bunch of documents and maybe have some calls, and it's all been very ad hoc. Yet this is something where we've built up so much ability to do this well. So I suppose, how do we get schools and teachers and students, many of them from a relatively, from standing start, to a really engaging, worthwhile way of remote learning, because that's what we have to do for now.
Yeah, and what I've noticed most of all is that both students and teachers and administrators, for that matter, working online are learning many of the same lessons that those of us with a long history in the field learned about 20 years ago. So they're learning, for example, that you can't force people to do things when they're online. The whole discipline thing works very differently. Motivation is a much bigger issue than it would be if you were face to face in class. The challenge is getting people to be able to do the sorts of things that we would almost call autonomous learning or self-directed learning, getting them to do those sorts of things on their own and to do them effectively. And in the studies that I've seen, some things are working, some things aren't working. They are taking to online community, which is great. They're not taking so much to doing your own research, digging up stuff on the web, etc. The hard stuff that we've taken actually many years to learn how to do as a profession. Tests and that have been kind of a disaster, more so again in other places than here, but where they've been a problem, they've really been a problem. But the whole question of assessment in an online environment is a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge.
So this one of the things that has happened is there's quite a few people who have unexpectedly found themselves with more time than they expected, and so they've had access to extraordinary educational resources. The MOOCs,
sure.
The massively open online courses, edX's and Coursera's and Udacity's and so on, which you were at the very beginning of.
Yeah.
So for them, is this simply just, okay, well, now I've got a lot more demand, we can hopefully scale up the supply, we do this, or does this provide some kind of a juncture or shift in the scope or impact or style of these things?
There's a lot more demand, first of all. Demand basically is quadrupled. More people signing up this year for MOOCs than, say, in the previous 4 years. I mean, it's been crazy. Now, I haven't offered a MOOC this year. I thought about offering one, but I thought, well, there will probably be plenty of supply, especially at the beginning. And I think that's true. I think there has been plenty of supply. And also, I think people are still finding their footing. So I didn't see a particular need to offer a MOOC. What I did see a need for, and it's interesting because this is the starting point where I was so many years ago, is just the quick and dirty collection of tools you need to do stuff online. The simple stuff: create a website, send a message, host a video conference, collaborate writing a document. People had to go out, discover things like Google Docs or stuff like what's the Microsoft thing, Teams. All of that, they had to learn all of that from scratch. So that's what my focus was just collecting resources, links to resources, and getting them out there. And I think that's the stage that people are at. As time goes by, especially once we settle in now to the fall, in the United States, it's going to be, despite what they say, it's going to be a mostly digital education. That's obviously going to have an impact on Canada as well. Even if we're still teaching in person here, we will be influenced by, the massively digital response south of the border, and we'll see a greater demand for courses, for resources. Less so for the tools, because people now, they'll have gotten their hands on them, they'll know what they're doing. They'll be looking for content, they'll be looking for services, and included in that are probably MOOCs.
So that goes a little bit to the point. Well, a lot of people think of MOOC as a bunch of videos, and so education, particularly at the I suppose beyond school level, is a lot more about engagement. You mentioned the communities are getting some traction.
Sure.
And this is about what we have as the potential next phase of education. Yes, we'll have some content where you sit and listen and take notes, but the actual more active or participatory or conversational or other formats of learning. So how do we get MOOCs from what they have been, or MOOCs or similar things, which is just a bunch of courseware essentially, to that more active engaging in a remote space?
Yeah, it's disappointed me, and I've expressed this in the past, the way MOOCs evolved as companies based out of Stanford or Harvard or even the UK have taken the concept of the MOOC and converted it into courseware. Our original MOOCs weren't that. We weren't focused on the content. We were focused on the activities, the interaction, the communication, the creativity. And that's what you need to bring back into MOOCs. And I think, they're doing that. FutureLearn, for example, is a good case where they are bringing in the interaction right in the same place as the content. But I think we could go a lot further. Some of the things that I've been looking at, for example, over the last year or 2 years, things like Jupyter Notebooks, which is a nifty little tool that allows you to put content plus software into a document such that a person reading the document can run the software, but not only run the software, can actually edit the software and run the edited software all in real time. And that's kind of the direction in which we're moving, away from static content, even away from even the quote unquote interaction where you're given some questions and you answer one and said, no, that is not the right answer, try again, that kind of silliness. This is real interaction with real software, and eventually, and there are a number of these notebooks that are doing this already, working with live data as well. You take that, combine that, say, and I don't know of an example of this out there yet, but it's going to come. Combine it with collaborative authoring, as we have in Google Docs, for example, and a number of other products. So now you have a collaborative environment, the software interface where you can run the software, connect with live data, and then ultimately connect with, sensor networks, robots, whatever, right? So you have this interactive virtual environment where you're working in real time with other people. That's how you bring back the interactivity into the digital learning environment. But you don't need to do all of that at once, right? Even beginning with, as we did, having people make their own websites, having people put comments on each other's websites, having people engage in a discussion forum, having people create something like a presentation or an image or whatever, having people go out, find resources, bring them back, and have people discuss them to actually learn how to work in an information environment. These are all things that can be done with today's technology. They're all things that we did in 2008, and there's no reason why MOOCs in the future can't be doing this, and I'm sure they will.
So that's, one of this, to me, I always talk about the peer learning with, with and from your peers. And that's a little bit what you're alluding to there, to be able to work that collaboratively. I think that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yes, I'm not so sure I like the idea of the word peer in this case, because, diversity is, the source of all learning, really. If you just see the same thing over and over again, you're not learning anything. So you want people who are not your peers. You want people to challenge you. You want people to need to learn from you. You want people in different disciplines arguing with you about a subject. So it's not just peers, other people, yes, other learners, yes, absolutely, but more than just peers.
Yes, though. I mean, I suppose the sense of peers is people who are learning alongside. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to that point, are you seeing any specific initiatives which are cross-national, being able to bring together? I mean, I've heard of some, for example, where you get kindergartners in different countries trying to do something together. So have you seen more around this kind of thing?
Some, but, I haven't been looking for them, so I can't say that I've seen them. My focus is on, on the technology, how to make stuff like that happen, as opposed to looking at, this school is doing this, that school is doing that. I'll leave that to other people.
Sure. So one of the key words I think which has been across your work is open. The open online courses, open educational resources, and so on. And who could have dreamed back in the day that now we have the degree of openness of educational resources that we do, but it's still not quite where it could be, I suppose. So what's your view on the state of the nation on open educational resources and hopefully on a global scale?
So the significant achievement of the MOOC, I think, is that it made open online learning a fact. It made open educational resources a fact, and we're not going to back away from either of these things in the future. I mean, it would take a dramatic sea change on the web. Not ruling it out. I mean, look at the year we've had, right? But really, those are pretty much established, I would say. And that's a good thing. We're seeing I don't want to say we're seeing a dividing up of the movement. I don't even want to say it's a movement, but we'll leave that aside. Dividing up of the community. But there's certainly a large group of people who are very interested now in open pedagogy and open approaches to learning, equitable approaches to learning. A lot of the literature from the philosophy of care coming from, originally the medical disciplines, but then also from feminist philosophy. A lot of that has had an impact on, following people like Nell Noddings and more contemporary writers on the less instructional oriented and more people oriented aspects of learning, taking into account not just individuals, not just their learning needs, but also their culture, their background, disabilities they may have, discrimination that they may face, all of that coming in together, playing a role in open learning. The argument is, and I think there's a point to this argument, simply giving people open access to resources doesn't give them open education. There's a lot more required. Yep. I agree with that. And so I think that's certainly worthwhile. On the technical side, there's been a reaction against the centralization especially of social networks. And we've seen what, a dumpster fire that has become. There's a reaction against, the control of the technologies by large companies, and therefore a move toward decentralized systems. We saw an early example of this and a much hyped example in blockchain. Now, blockchain as itself, probably a lot more hype than reality, but the technologies behind blockchain. Here I'm thinking of, for example, Merkle chains, content-based addressing, encryption, consensus-based networks. Yeah. These are important developments, and these developments are going to shape a lot of the world of open educational resources in the future. one of the things that I did starting late in 2018 is to create something I called a content addressable resource for education, CARE, completely independently of what I just talked about duty of care. I was completely oblivious to that when I came up with the name. I kind of regret that, but I couldn't resist, right? Because you have care and care packages and CareNet. But the idea of a content addressable resource for education is that you create a resource, run it through an encryption algorithm, which creates a hash of that resource. The hash is just an encryption of the resource of a certain fixed length. Use that hash as the address of the resource, making the resource available in distributed network accessible by requesting that hash. And the beauty of that is, if somebody sends you the resource, you can verify that you've got the actual resource by taking the resource, running it through the encryption algorithm again, and checking the result and making sure it matches the address that you are looking for. So we have distribution, which means no centralized repositories. We have content verification. Similar mechanisms are used for identity verification, so we can verify authorship, provenance of the resource, etc. It's kind of like blockchain-y, but it's kind of not.
Yeah.
It's based on things like interplanetary file system.
Yep.
I love the name, and the DAT protocol. This sort of stuff is happening as well. So it's interesting, right? You have care and support on one side, distributed content networks on the other side, and then everything in between for open resources.
Which was one of the implications which comes to me is around this modularization of educational content. So you can then have all of those modular resources, possibly micro-modular, in order to be able to construct your own course or for resources which can be used in personalized learning programs, for example.
Yeah, but we want to be careful, right? We're not inventing learning objects all over again. Again, we're learning the lessons of 20 years ago all over again. And I guess I sound like every old guy in the world ever who says, no, we did this 20 years ago. And here's but it's true in this case. The temptation is for a content provider, say, or an educational institution to want to take these resources, assemble them in a nice, neat package, organized in a linear fashion, of course, and then present them as a series of resources for a student to work through, probably on their own, ideally personalized using some sort of AI technology. And, it's just that same self-study model as it's always been. And I think that would be a mistake. And I think it would be a mistake because nobody should have to learn that way. It's not fun. It's not interesting. And probably it's not effective. And the reason why I say that is because you can focus in on the learning content, which you could do with these resources. But to learn a discipline, you have to learn much more than the content. You have to learn, I like to say, what it's like to be a person in that discipline. And you can only learn that in an ad hoc, open-ended kind of way, interacting with other people, your peers, as you say, but also the people who are already practitioners and professionals in that discipline, and also people who are just interested in the discipline from the outside world. So instead of organized content packages, these resources really should be thought of as, I don't want to say buffet, that's not quite the right word, but I sometimes use the word galaxy, but that's way too many. But just there's this sea of resources that you can grab from on an as-needed basis, or even better, because this is what's going to happen. Artificial intelligence systems will create a resource for you on the fly out of data that's in the world, present the resource for you, you use the resource, and then it's disposable. The idea of permanent learning resources in possibly as little as 5 years, certainly within 10 years, will be thought of as, ineffective. Why would we do it that way? Why not just let the AI write our resources for us? I mean, you look at the stuff that the most recent GPT-3 is doing. It's already writing stuff. The big trick with GPT-3 is to make sure it writes stuff that's true. But I think we're so close to just, automatically generated, disposable learning resources that are just out there. There's a sea of them. People are reusing them. They're doing whatever they want with them. They're mashing them up. They're memeing them. But at the same time, they're working or learning in environments that are as real and authentic as possible. Many times, working with the actual software that the professionals use, students are using that software, working in the same sort of environment. And we could talk a lot about that.
And so just to the point of the AI, I mean, the massive promise today is of truly personalized learning. And, there's a lot of cautions, I suppose, in how that is done. But the reality is people are different. People learn in different ways. And classes or, lectures or whatever they are never tailored for the individual. And now we can complement, that human touch and motivation, inspiration with potentially truly personalized, relevant education through AI. So are we at that point yet, or how much more of the journey have we got to go to where that vision is realized?
Depends on what the vision is. When people talk about personalized learning, very often what they're talking about is some kind of sophisticated content recommendation system and learning management system that presents resources and activities customized to an individual. And that, to my mind, puts the agency in the wrong place. That's still a picture of an education where the system, which may include teachers and institutions, etc., provides an education for you. But I think, I distinguish between personalized learning and personal learning, where personal learning is you create an education for yourself. And so the artificial intelligence is on your side, not the teacher's side. The artificial intelligence is working for you, not for someone else. Now, institutions and all that will still use AI for sure. But my AI will be on my device doing my work for me. It'll be out there looking for stuff that I ask it to find, not what some educational institution thinks that I should find. You see the distinction, right? And the focus will be different. It's already shifting this way. Jay Cross used to talk about informal learning and the distinction between informal learning and formal learning. There are various levels of that distinction, but one of the key distinctions is that formal learning is based on amassing or mastering a body of knowledge. Informal learning is based on getting something done. And that's where personal learning is focused. Personal learning is focused on what it is the person is trying to do now and how to provide support in whatever way, including learning, the person will need in order to get that thing done. And so you see, when we're thinking of AI-supported learning in this way, we're thinking of something very different from the traditional perspective, the content recommender kind of perspective of personalized learning. Now, personal learning, the way I'm describing it, I think is very close. I've got a device right now. If I give a talk, it transcribes the talk for me on its own. All I need to do is light editing. I have an account on Feedly, which is an RSS reader. It's very good. I've been using it for years. I have subscriptions to about 800 different feeds. Feedly has just introduced an artificial intelligence that will allow me to screen those resources based on the resources that I've selected over the years. You might select them by starring them or saving them to read later or whatever. Based on that activity, is able to look at all those feeds that I'm subscribed to and prioritize. And it's not eliminating choices, but it's organizing them for me. If I like it, great. If I don't like it, I can turn it off, or I can control it, tell it, don't give me that. I'm not really interested in Westerns. You know what I mean? So much better than the Netflix algorithm. And there's other things as well. But you see how these tools are trying to help me do whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And the idea is that my learning is created through the fact of me trying to do things. The role of educational institutions, and in this I would include corporations and corporate learning as well, is to create that environment where I'm trying to do something. The more authentic, the better. So if I were, for example, a college or a university, and I was trying to plan for, what are our programs going to look like 10, 20 years from now? I'd be thinking, we need, for example, a social development kind of program. And the people in this program will enter into the program. They will work on actual problems in society. Pick out of the air, right? Homelessness, litter, pollution, I don't know, traffic. Different people have different interests. And so let's pick traffic, because I love traffic. They get actual tools that traffic managers use that have real-time civic data on traffic, including modeling environments and all the rest of the AI that's used to control traffic flows. And they try to improve traffic. How? Well, that's up to them. What are the objectives? Well, those are negotiated. What are the learning outcomes? I don't know. But I do know at the end of this, those that went into this for this purpose, to learn how to become traffic system designers or whatever traffic people do, they will be better at it. But not in the traditional way of being better at it, where you give them a test, they score 92, but better at it in the sense that an existing traffic person, whatever they're called, I know nothing about the discipline, I'm just interested in it, would look at this newly emerging traffic person and say, yes, I recognize that you are in fact a qualified traffic person because the work that you do is quality traffic person work. And even here, the AI will assist us, because in the back of the ear, the AI will be whispering to them, yes, that person is qualified, they've done this, they've done that, they've done that, they've done that, because the AI will detect what they've done, match it to what professional traffic people do, and say, oh yeah, fits the bill.
Right, yes. Yeah, there's many ways that those tools could help. So perhaps to round out, one of the important issues around education has been access, equality, inclusion, having obviously from a digital perspective for starters, being able, and also having the, I suppose, skills or competence. Some people are very comfortable to get in front of a screen. Other people need more help. So how can we, make it as inclusive as possible to show the care that's necessary to get everybody in this way, as in this world where we all need education consistently?
Well, first of all, it has to be a policy imperative, right? You have to actually want to make sure everybody in your country or in your society or in your world has things like electricity and internet access, proper internet access, not to mention food, water, shelter, clothing. You got to do this work. You don't create a high quality education system in poverty stricken conditions. You have to address that. But the core requirements of a learning system, open and accessible learning, are part of an overall policy reduction program. Then you have to provide access to learning opportunities. And these opportunities, there's no single thing that works for everybody. It's a complex world. People are different. So there have to be a range of opportunities, a range of types of resources, a range of programs. But also, too, I think there has to be local support. In just what I've seen over the years, from way back in pre-internet, pre-history days, when I was teaching in Northern Alberta, I saw that students that had local support, people there in the community helping them, making sure that they got to the classes, that they had their books, etc. Those were the students that succeeded. And students that were just, thrown into a class without any support, those were the ones who failed. It's almost independent of the individual student. So you have to have that. There needs to be, I sometimes say, there needs to be somebody on the student's side, somebody who is an advocate for the student, helping them navigate the system. And of course, you want the system to be as navigable as possible. And then there are the skills and capacities. This is not unique to online learning. Traditional learning requires these as well. Traditional learning requires skills and capacities like punctuality, like literacy, like social, I don't know what the good word for it, but behaving in a socially responsible manner, not beating up people, stuff like that. I'm sure there's a word for it. That sort of stuff, right? All of these things need to be taught before children can actually learn. Children need to learn to read before they can read to learn. And of course, it's an iterative process. But similarly with digital literacies, and here I'm thinking not just of how to use a search engine, how to protect yourself from fake news. There's a whole range of things that have been classified as digital literacies. But I think even more core are things like how to recognize regularities in the world. I always thought Sesame Street was brilliant when they did the three of these things belong together, one of these things doesn't belong. You present it with four objects. You pick the one that doesn't match the pattern. Brilliant, just brilliant. You're teaching them pattern matching skills. You're teaching them how to spot regularities, ultimately how to spot laws of nature, but patterns, schemas, designs, that sort of thing. They need to learn how value is created. And here I'm not talking economic value. I'm talking about things like truth, like belief, like importance, or the range of values, the range of, you might call them semantical features of our society. They need to learn about change. We need a society that doesn't think everything will be the same, because if we've learned anything from the pandemic, everything will go along fine, and then the graph suddenly changes abruptly. People need to be ready for that. Those sorts of things. And, and again, it's an iterative process, but it needs to be a policy that we want our learners to be able to think and learn for themselves. Until we make that decision as a society, we're not going to be successful with digital learning.
Yeah, the absolute foundations, from a social perspective to beyond, but education becomes the future of all of us. So thank you so much for your insights and your time, Stephen. It's been fantastic to catch up and to share that on the Virtual Excellence Show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's nice to talk to you, and I hope I didn't babble too much.
That's great to hear that. All right, thank you. That was Stephen Downs, virtual learning expert, let's call him that, though it's far more than that, and sharing on the ideas on the open education and what it is we need to be able to create the future of virtual education. So, as always, if you've liked the video, please like it and subscribe on YouTube. We'll be back next week with more. Thanks. Have a great day.